In this video, I'm going to be talking about insulin therapy and how it can improve your health if you're living with diabetes. I'm going to show you how insulin therapy works and how it can help improve your blood sugar levels, lower your risk of heart disease, and help you feel better overall. So if you're interested in learning more, stick around. If you're new to me, I'm Dr. Dwayne Wood. That's Wood with an E. The E stands for endocrinology. And here on the channel, I help to educate, I encourage, and I empower you to take charge of your life, your health, avoid complications, and go to that next level. Live the life that you have always wanted. You're catching us in the middle of, well, actually coming close to the end of Diabetes Awareness Month. Every November, we take time, the world, that is, takes time to educate and to dispel some of the myths that may be out there about diabetes, to help people to understand that they can prevent the progression from their early states, pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, to diabetes. And if they are living with diabetes, they can live a healthy, long, fulfilling life, avoiding complications. And that's what I've been doing here for the entire month. And you're catching me in the middle of talking about insulin therapy. If you've not done so, there is an entire playlist. It's called Diabetes 101 series, Diabetes 101 series, and it's on the YouTube channel. Go back and watch those videos. We've done an excellent job of going through and talking about the various topics within diabetes. And I am now in the middle of talking about therapy. We've talked about lifestyle and non-prescription therapy and so forth. And now we are talking about prescription medication. I've already done 2 segments in this little area in terms of prescription medication. One, we've talked about pills. We talked about oral medications. We talked about non-insulin injectables. And now we're starting our discussion about insulin therapy and how that can help you. So if you know someone who has diabetes, someone who is taking insulin, someone who's taking prescription medication, go ahead and send the link to them so that they can join us and let them know that we are here. So with that said, if you're out there, give us a thumbs up. If you like what we've been doing so far for the month, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, drop us a message, drop us a note. We love to connect with you. I love to connect with you. I love hearing from you. I love when I see messages from people who are engaging in our content. So thank you very much. So let's hop over and let's get to our discussion. So we're talking about insulin therapy and how can insulin therapy improve your health, right? How it can improve your health. Now, we've gone through and we've had a good discussion about so many different areas about treatment. And if you have not done so, like I said, go back and watch those. And you remember the whole thrust of the treatment part is that we are trying to decrease complications. And as we look at how the body functions, all the things that we eat, proteins, fats, carbs, are with the intention of providing us with energy. And the door that you see there is the cell where the energy needs to get in. We've eaten food, the body's taken this food and has digested it, and now the energy, we need to get the food into the cell, and there's the door there. And you remember, insulin is the key. Insulin is the key to get that food that we've processed into the cell so that we can produce energy, and any excess that we have goes into storage. So that's the kind of premise that we're working on. We've talked about prescription medication, oral medications, like I said, non-insulin injectables. And in this episode, we're going to begin our conversation about insulin therapy, and you'll see it there. And so let's just hop back over. So proteins come in, the body digests it, and the ultimate goal is to turn it into food. And you remember that, like I said, insulin is the key. Insulin is the key that opens up that door that gets us the energy that we want. Well, there are a couple of things that we need to talk about before we get into insulin therapy, right? Some things that we've got to understand. The body, this amazing machinery that we have, is always in one of 3 different states. Okay, so remember that the body is always in one of 3 different states. Either we've fed, that we've eaten, right? Or we have finished eating, that's the fasting. And if the fasting goes on for long, that's called starvation. We're always in one of those three states. And if you, if you remember my story about Thanksgiving, right? Like yesterday, Thanksgiving, I don't think many of us were in the starvation state at all. I tell you, I know I wasn't, right? So we're either in the fed state, we're eating, or we're just after eating, called the fasting, or we're in the starvation if that goes for long. Okay, one of those three different states. And we're going to kind of go through those. And those are important as we begin talking about insulin therapy and how insulin will work in the body to help us improve our health by lowering those blood sugars, right? So fed, eating, fasting, we just finished eating, and starvation if we haven't eaten for a long time, okay? So in the fed state, we're eating food, right? And we're going to concentrate on glucose or the carbohydrates, not because the others, the fats and the proteins, aren't important, but because this is the main thrust of our conversation in terms of high blood sugar. Now, down the road, we're going to have to come back and talk about the proteins and the fats because it's going to have very, very interesting implications when we talk about the starvation, right? Because the body's going to turn to those things now to begin getting energy from us. But for now, we're going to concentrate on the glucose. But so we eat food, and ultimately that food gets broken down, it gets digested, and it goes into the body. And as the body, the pancreas sees the sugar coming at it, then the pancreas produces this hormone that we've been talking about called insulin, right? This is a normal process. This goes through everybody's system. Everybody that's on the planet, this is how their body works until something goes wrong, right? So we're talking about normal physiology at this point. We're not talking about people who have diabetes yet. But in the normal process, we eat food, it gets digested, the glucose starts to rise, the body in the pancreas sees that the glucose is rising, and it produces insulin. That's the fed state, right? We're sitting at the table, and right? So yesterday I had turkey, I had dressing, what did I have? Mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, I had some cake. Right? Had juice, right? So I'm sitting there. That's the fed, right? Everything's going in. And as long as you're in the fed state, this process is happening. So like if you eat breakfast and you finish eating breakfast and you get up from the table and you stop eating, right? That fed state can take 2, 3, 4 hours, right? Right, so you're done, right? So the body is still in there. It's digesting all the stuff, right? But what happens if you get up from the table like we do, we finish eating our meal, and as we're heading to the dining room or heading to the kitchen or heading to wherever, we grab a cookie or we grab some juice. Guess what? The fed state is not gone, right? Because we're still what? Still putting stuff in, right? So the fed state, right? Anytime you are eating something, then you're in the fed state. So the body begins going through this process. It's breaking it down. The sugar is being extracted. The sugar rises. The pancreas sees the sugar level, and it now releases insulin. Does that make sense? So that's fed, right? So as long as you're putting stuff in your mouth, that is one of the things that we'll talk about, probably not even this month. We'll come back and we'll talk about that. But how do we deal with that process that we have, right? Is it just a matter of discipline? Is it a matter of convenience? Is there something else going on that's forcing us to do that, right? And I'll tell you the truth, right? So if we finish eating, well, let me go back to yesterday, right? So we finished eating, and we hadn't had dessert yet. Okay. So we finished eating the main meal, and we were going to play some games, and, people started milling around and people started sleeping and so forth. And so we're sitting there and I'm waiting to play these games. And so I started talking to a friend of mine. We were at his house. Thank you, by the way. Right. And so I'm thinking, well, what happened to the dessert? We haven't got dessert yet. Right. And so it was maybe an hour and a half, at most 2 hours. And then somebody got up to get dessert. And I said, wait, they said there was ice cream. Ice cream? What? So walked over, right? I think was it pumpkin pie or sweet potato pie? It was some kind of pies. Right. So was I hungry? No. Were you hungry? No. Right. So sometimes we're not necessarily eating because we're hungry. Well, a lot of times we're not eating because we're hungry. We're eating because it's the next thing. Right. We had dinner. We're supposed to have dessert. Where's the dessert? Well, it's the next thing to come. Let's have it. Right. So anyway, so we'll talk about all of those. But so this is the fed state where we're putting stuff in and the body is breaking it down and absorbing it. Okay. So this, and let me pop over. Let's get back here for a second. Let's pop over to this one. So fasting, right? We'll come back to the other one. Well, let's deal with that now. So once you finish the fed state, once you finish eating, as time goes by, the blood sugar levels drop, right? Because you're not eating anymore. So the blood sugar levels are going down as your body is taking the food that you just ate and is packaging it. It's converting it to energy so you can breathe and move and, you know, your heart's beating. All those things that are going on automatically needs energy. So as you're not eating, the glucose level is dropping. And as the glucose level goes down, so does the insulin. Because remember, insulin is the responder to glucose. So if the glucose is high, the insulin goes up. When the glucose starts to drop, so does the insulin. And in fact, at some point, insulin sometimes gets down to 1, right? And in diabetics, it's even lower than that. But yeah, it gets down in a normal process. As the sugar drops, the insulin goes down. As the insulin goes down, okay? So then this process of having the insulin go down triggers some things in the body because the body says, hey, we're not in the fed state anymore. So we've got to transition to something else. And so we move over into the fasting state. That's assuming that you didn't grab that cookie on the way out of the dining room. So fasting says we're not eating anything. So because the sugar has gone down, so does the insulin level. The insulin level drops down. When the insulin level goes down, then it triggers another hormone in the body. And you may have heard this one. It's called glucagon. So glucagon is the hormone that comes out after the insulin goes down, right? So decrease insulin, now glucagon comes up. And glucagon's job is in this post-eating, if you will, this post-eating state. Its job is to help keep you alive. Yeah, buddy. Right? Because remember, the sugar is dropping. And if it drops too low, then we run into trouble because then what? We don't have enough energy for our brains to think, for our heart to beat, for our lungs to breathe, for our muscles to move, right? So all the things that the body does automatically, and even some things that it doesn't do, like if you decide you're climbing up the stairs or moving something, like I went out to the garage, my son and I, and we brought in some Christmas stuff, right? Because it's after Thanksgiving. I don't know what you do at your house, but there we go, right? So all the stuff's coming out now. The tree's about to go up. And then we went outside and, we blew some leaves because I got these trees in my yard. I think some of the neighbors' trees leaves comes off in my yard too. Sorry. Right? But you get the idea. Right? All those things still have to happen. And we're not eating anymore. And as the sugar goes down, the stuff we just ate, that energy goes away. So now the body has to find energy somewhere because we're not eating right now. So glucagon comes out and glucagon goes into the body and says, hey, it goes into the cabinet. So, hey, where did I put all that food that we stored away? And it starts breaking those down. So that's what's going on in the fasting state. Now, we all go through this state multiple times a day. For instance, if you eat breakfast and you don't eat until lunch, before you get to lunch, if it's, depending on how long it is, by the way, it's about 4 hours, right? If you haven't eaten for 4 hours, you go into the fasting state. we all go into a fasting state at night, right? Depending on whether you ate right before you went to bed. But as we're sleeping, we're in the fasting state. And the thing that's keeping us alive while we're in the fasting state is the fact that the sugar was low, the insulin dropped, the glucagon came out, and the glucagon goes about finding energy for us to live. And what is the energy that the glucagon is finding? It gets whatever it finds, right? It converts it back into sugar. Woohoo, watch it. See? I want you to notice something. You're sleeping, and you're not eating, but the blood sugar is going up because of glucagon, because it's keeping you alive. All right, I want you to follow me, because this is going to be very important as we get to the insulin. So we got the fed state where we're putting food in. We got, which is an insulin-driven state, right? All the stuff that goes on there is due to insulin. So we eat, insulin's putting the stuff in, converting it into energy, storing the excess. And now the sugar begins going down. The energy goes down, the sugar goes down, the insulin goes down. When the insulin goes down, the body switches from the fed state into the fasting state, because glucagon comes out and says, hey, I got to keep you alive because you got all this stuff going on that we need energy for. So for the diabetic, before we get onto the starvation state, for the diabetic then, while we're eating, we can have high blood sugar, right? Because we're putting food in, so the glucose is there. And when we're not eating, we can have high blood sugar because of glucagon, right? High sugar when we eat, high sugar when we're not eating. So my diabetics will say to me, I went to sleep. I did not do it. I didn't eat anything. I went to sleep. I didn't eat till 4 o'clock, since 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I went to bed. My blood sugar was 100. And I woke up and the blood sugar was high. Because the body's keeping you alive, for one, right? There's some other reasons that we'll talk about. Okay? Does that make sense so far? I hope so. And then, if this process goes on for too long, right? And we're not going to define too long for that. Well, maybe I will. Then we get into the starvation state. And the starvation state is all about survival, right? So if you go and probably 48 hours, right? So the food that you ate today, like right now, the food that you ate today doesn't disappear. The energy from that doesn't disappear from the body for 2, maybe 3 days. Follow me. So I ate Thanksgiving dinner yesterday. And if I didn't eat today, and if I didn't eat tomorrow, and if I didn't eat part of the next day, then I still have energy from the food that I ate yesterday. Right? So it takes that long before the body goes into the survival or starvation state. Right? So people say, oh, they ate yesterday and say, oh, I'm starving. No, you're not starving. Right? So the starvation state is all about survival. And the number one priority for starvation is to make sure that it can fuel the brain. Right? That's the number one priority, to make sure it can fuel the brain. So the body goes about finding energy somewhere so that the brain can continue to function, right? So we've gone 2.5 days, gone 3 days. We haven't eaten. All the stores, all the energy from the food we ate yesterday is gone. And so now the body has to find food somewhere, has to find energy somewhere. Yeah, we'll talk about where that's coming from. Number 2 is the conservation of amino acids. You remember we talked about proteins are broken down, right? We won't get into the physiology there. But why are we conserving amino acids? Because we're conserving them for protein. You remember we said that there are 2 things that 2 things that food go to in the body. Number one, it goes for energy for the stuff that you're doing right now, breathing, moving, hearts beating, talking, thinking. And it also goes to rebuild, right? Things that are broken down in the body. So when the body goes into the survival state, it says, hey, wait a minute. I've got to find energy so the brain can survive. And I've got to make sure that I've got enough building blocks in case something breaks, I can fix it. Two priorities. And so what happens? All of the cells in the body that normally use sugar for energy, if they're able to use something else, we switch to that. It's kind of like, let me see, what is it kind of like? Oh, you know what? When we went camping down in Florida, 5,000 people. You guys remember I told you about that. So 5,000 people out there camping. We ran into this group and it was amazing. They had taken a trailer, right? And they had converted it to a mobile kitchen. So I went in and I looked. I should have taken pictures, but I went in and I looked at it. They had a refrigerator, they had sink, they had dishwasher, they had cabinets, right? It was like being in a kitchen. They had converted it to a mobile kitchen, like this trailer that they, And so I said to them, I said, hey, how do you guys, what do you do? Right? Because we had a generator, right? You pull it, the right, that was powering us. And they said, well, yeah, we have a generator. But we can also plug, when we're traveling, right? We don't want to use up what's in the gas that we have in the generator until we get to the place, right? So we don't use that. But we pull it up with us. And while we're traveling, it uses batteries. Yeah, they had these great big batteries that they had, put together. So while they're on the road, the trailer, the refrigerator, all the stuff that's in there that needs energy, used the battery. And when they stopped for the night, like if they're traveling across country and they stop for the night at a hotel or whatever, then they don't use the battery because they don't want to drain the battery. So they plug the trailer in to that socket. I guess they run a cord, right? And they plug it in. So they charge the battery and they power the refrigerator that's in the trailer. And then, of course, when they show up on the campsite, right, if there's no electricity there, then, right, they hit and the generator. So they're able to switch from one source of energy to something else. And the body can do exactly the same thing. It can switch from using glucose, certain tissues, certain parts of the body. It can switch from using glucose to using something else. For example, the muscles switch from using glucose to using fatty acids. Right? That's an example. Certain parts of the body can also use ketones. That's a whole, a whole nother conversation. So we're in the fed state. We've eaten and the body's breaking down the food, digesting it. We got energy. We stored it. Then we go to the fasting state. And if we're in the fasting state, we go through the fasting state. We've used up all of the energy that we got from the food that we just had. Now we get into the starvation state, which is the survival state. And we're protecting the brain. We're storing amino acids for proteins so that we can build stuff up if they break down. Tissues like the muscles that can use alternate sources of energy switch. Like the muscles use fatty acids. And you remember that fatty acids are stored in a form called what? Triglycerides. So when the muscle starts using the fatty acids, the free fatty acids, then there's still that glycerol part, right? Because there's three, glyceride. So the tri stuff comes off and the glycerol is left. And the glycerol can be turned into sugar. And then if we're in that state long enough, of course, then the body says, hey, I can't keep storing these proteins, right? I got these blocks that I'm storing, but I haven't eaten in whatever number of days. We got to start using those because it's better to not be able to repair something and be alive than to try to store this stuff so I can repair something that's broken and I'm not alive. Right? See how the body is pretty smart. Right? So those are the 3 states that we go into. So that it's possible in every single one of those states. And now we're turning to the diabetes. This was normal so far. Now we're turning to someone who has diabetes. When we're eating, the blood sugar can be high. When we are in the fasting state, the blood sugar can be high because the body is right, because we're not eating anything anymore. And it's going out to find energy. Energy is in the form of glucose. The blood sugars are high. And now in the survival state, in the starvation state, we can still have a high blood sugar. Because the body is using stuff to make sugar, right? Because that's what it does. Now, you may be asking, why does it do that? Why is it, if the sugar is so high in the diabetic, right? Because remember we said the blood sugar is already high. Why is it still doing all this stuff? Well, because the sugar can't get into the cell properly. So the body figures if it makes more, right, just the force of the sugar that it has, some of it is going to get into the cell. Right? So the body's making those decisions. So 3 states that we've got to know: the fed, the fasting, and starvation. Well, if we think about the diabetic, if I think about a person who has diabetes, then blood sugars can be high, like I said, at any one of those 3. And you'll see on the screen, the 3 humps, those are times when we're eating, right? So breakfast, lunch, supper, dinner, depending on where you're from. And then what I should do is put little humps, right? For snacks, right? We have those snacks. But even without those humps, you see that the baseline is already high because the body's producing sugar for all the things that are going on in itself, right? All of the mechanisms that have to work. Your brain, your eyes, your heart, your lung, your GI tract, going to the bowel, bathroom, moving, climbing, right? All those things require energy. And so when we're talking about treatment of diabetes with insulin, we've got to take all of that into consideration. Right? That's a long way to say this. Right? Because we had to get there before we got here. So we're talking about managing diabetes with insulin. All of that stuff that I just talked about, we take into consideration as we are talking about insulin. And so insulin comes in a few different forms: basal, bolus, and mixed. The basal insulin we're going to talk about, and that's going to be the insulin that we are using to treat blood sugars when we're not eating. Remember we talked about the fasting state and the starvation state? When you're not eating, if the blood sugar can still be high, then we need something to treat that blood sugar. And that's what we call the basal insulin. And then when you eat, if the blood sugar goes up, we need something to treat that blood sugar, and that's called the bolus. So basal bolus. So you'll hear people talk about treating diabetes with insulin using basal bolus, right? And that's what they're talking about. There are 2 types of insulin. One that we use for treating blood sugar when people aren't eating, called the basal, and one that we use when we treat blood sugar from that comes from the food that we eat, and that's called the bolus, basal bolus. And then the mixed insulin that you see there, the mixed insulin is actually a combination of insulin used to treat basal or treat blood sugar when we're not eating, and insulin used to treat blood sugar when we eat. Right? So we've put those 2 together, and that's called mixed insulin, called pre-mixed insulin. And I just shortened it to mixed. Okay? And then there's some other little things that we'll throw in as we talk about the different types of insulin. But you'll see there the basal insulins, right? We've got Lantus, Levemir, Toujeo, Tresiba, Basaglar. There's one that I didn't put up there. I think it's called Semglee. I shouldn't say I think. It's called Semglee, right? All right. So there are others, like if you're in different parts of the world, you may have different names for them, different brand names, but essentially they're the same, but they all behave in similar ways. Now, they're different, how long they last and so forth, and we won't get into all of that. But these are insulins that are used to treat blood sugar that occurs when people are not eating. That's just the sugar that comes from just life. And then bolus insulins, you'll see those there as well. There's Novolog, Humalog, Apidra, Limjev, and there are some others once again, right, that you'll hear names, but those are a representative group. And then other types of insulin, regular insulin and NPH, and we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, how they work. Not in this episode, you're going to have to come back. And then U500 is an interesting insulin. It is 5 times stronger than any of the other insulins that you see there on the screen. Okay. And then remember I talked about the mixed or pre-mixed, and that you'll see there. And I just put the numbers 70-30 or 75-25. There's also a 50-50, which I don't have on the screen. And then there are combination ones like Soliqua. And you saw Soliqua actually was in 3, now it's in 3 different parts of the treatment, right? Because we saw it when we initially talked about GLPs, because Soliqua is a combination, right? So it has insulin in it and it has a GLP. And we talked about it when we, so actually we talked about when we talked about the GLPs, and now we talk about it when we talk about insulin. I said 3, but actually two areas, right? Does that make sense? So those are the insulins. And I hope that gives you a good idea of how insulin works. So we talked about a little bit of normal physiology, the fed state, the fasting state, the starvation state. Now, all of those states, right? If you've been someone who's been interested in some of the diets that are out there, the diet plans that are out there, like intermittent fasting, that's going to have implications when we talk about intermittent fasting. Right, because you'll need to know some of that information, right? So, I mean, fascinating. Like I said, I love how the body works. All right, well, this is a great place for us to hop over to our amazing question wheel. Let's do that right now. All right, so our amazing question wheel. If you are new to us and you don't know how this works, let me explain. So on the screen, you'll see our question wheel with questions that are listed. If you want your question to show up on the wheel, go ahead and send those to us in our email or on any of our social media platforms. Let me pop back over to the screen, and you'll see right there under my name, Dwayne Wood MD, somewhere over here, right? That way, yeah, Dwayne Wood MD. So TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those places you can do that. And I'm actually going to put my email address on the screen at some point. So dwood at dwaynewoodmd.com. dwood at dwaynewoodmd.com is where you want to go to get that information. Okay, but or drop us that line. All right, let's get back over to our screen. So on the screen, so I'm going to spin the wheel. Whatever question it lands on, I'm going to answer the question. Yeah. And I'm going to give you a concise, usable, practical, real answer to that question. But I've got to give it in 45 seconds. That's right, 45 seconds. I've got to give the answer in 45 seconds. And then I'm going to take that answer, I'm going to clip it out, I'm going to create a video for it. I'm going to post it on our social media platforms. And I want you to go out and find it on those social media platforms. And when you find it, I want you to put in the comments, hashtag I was there. Let me write that down here so you can see. Hashtag I was there. Hashtag I was there. Okay, let's put that on the screen. right? Hashtag I was there. Okay. So that I know that you were there and you can put your mark on that video. Okay. All right. All right. So let's go ahead and let's, and I'm going to do something with that. Like, you know, if, and I'm not sure how to do that. So if you know how I can do that. So hashtag I was there, right? The person who puts the most hashtags on the most videos. Is that a good one? I don't know if that's a good way to do that. Let me think about that. Right. So I'm going to do something for the hashtags I was there. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and let's spin the wheel right now. Round and round and round it goes. Where it stops, I don't know. All right. Let's see what we got. I have surgery scheduled. What should I do? I have surgery scheduled. What should I? That's an interesting one. Yeah. We actually get that question quite often in our practice. So let's see. I have surgery scheduled. What should I do? Have surgery scheduled. Okay. All right. Here we go. So let me think about that because I have to probably give two answers. Okay. I got it. I have surgery scheduled. What should I do? Well, what you should do depends on whether you're a type 1 or type 2 diabetic. So type 1 diabetics require insulin. So you should not stop your insulin at all. Okay. You will have to talk to your provider about perhaps adjusting the dose of your insulin. If you're type 2 diabetic, then your provider may recommend that you don't take insulin the night before and that you not take your medication the morning of the procedure, but check with your healthcare provider. All right, did I get that? All right. All right. All right. So I think that was a good answer, right? I tried to do it too, right? Type 1, type 2. Okay, we'll see. All right. So there are so many different types of insulins out there, and it can be really confusing. After this episode, you should have a better idea of why we use insulin and the types. We're going to come back and we're going to talk more specifically about what they do, how to use them, how to calculate the insulin, how to adjust the insulin. Come on back for the next show as I continue discussing the treatment of diabetes using insulin. There's more about insulin to come, so you don't want to miss it. I thank you for being here. I really appreciate when you come by. I really appreciate when you engage with me, when you engage with the material, when you engage with the videos. And if you've not done so yet, please subscribe to our channel. Go into your account and create an account if you don't have one. Log into the account, hit the subscription button, and then it says subscribe, I believe. They changed the color also. It's white now. And also hit the bell. And that will alert you when new content comes up on the channel, right? If you know someone who's having trouble subscribing, go ahead and help them out. If you're watching this on the replay, put hashtag replay, and let me know what you're getting. What takeaways are you getting from the videos that we're doing? If you've seen us recently, you saw that there was a free resource that I made available. Let's see if I can hop over here real quick. There's a free resource that I made available for you all on our website, and that's Dwayne Wood MD. Let's get over there. DwayneWoodMD.com. If you go to DwayneWoodMD.com, and let's see if I can pop over here. Yeah. So Dwayne Wood MD. If you go to our website, and this one says amazing question wheel, but that's okay. And if you click this button right here, right, it says free 7 keys to success. You get an ebook and you log in. That's the book. That's me right there. See, look at that handsome looking fella. Right, go down to the bottom, you'll put in your email and your name, email and your first name, and you'll hit the button right here, and you'll get an email giving you the link to download the book, okay? And it's just a free resource, and I'll do a little blurb or something, a video to explain why I did that, why I wanted to do that and make that available to you. I think it's so important that that we know how to move in the direction of success. And the book, if you look at the bottom, it says steps successful leaders use to create the life they want. Right? Remember, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it, I keep saying it all the time. We are no longer letting life happen to us. Okay? No longer. We're not in that anymore, right? We're not going to let things just happen. We are going to create the life that we want. And this little resource gives you 7 keys that successful people are using to make those things happen. I see Penny. Penny, how are you doing? Let me come over here and pop that up. And Penny says, thank you. If I can get you. There you go. Penny says, thank you. Let me give you, Penny. I think you are new to us, aren't you? Yes. Give Penny a little hand clap and some music. Thank you for stopping by, and we look forward to engaging and seeing you more as I continue working with this content. But thank you so much for watching. This is Dr. Dwayne Wood. That's Wood with an E. The E stands for endocrinology. Here on the channel, I educate, I empower, and I encourage you to take charge of your health, your life. Go to the next level. Avoid complications and live the life you've always wanted. Good night. We'll see you at the next episode. Bye-bye.